So listening to a quote like this, it's understandable why someone might see this as unbelievably idealistic, unattainable for humankind. Yet it's important at the same time to understand that that's not necessarily an argument. It's not actually a reason to not fight for it. It's not a reason to not believe it can be done. It's, in some sense, claiming something is idealistic often is taken as a, if you will, brush off of an idea. We have often this conflict between the ideas of idealism and realism. And I think it's important to notice that this is actually just the use of terminology at times to brush off ideas. Because we also have the terms optimistic and pessimistic. That in some sense, when we call someone idealist, we're just stating that we couldn't possibly achieve what they're talking about. But why don't we just call that pessimistic? The political social world in which we live is itself only composed of people. And it's the psychological, spiritual, moral, and belief states of the individuals that make up the body politic of our entire planet. So if we ourselves choose to be pessimists, it is actually if you will, a negative feedback loop, which creates the very problems that are causing us to be pessimist or realist. Oftentimes when people encounter such a vision of a possible future, they'll ask, like, how could we possibly achieve this? The first thing to note actually is whether or not that is really a question. If someone is asking how could we possibly achieve this, then the next discussion has to be, well, these are the ways we can actually achieve it. But often the question of, well, how could we possibly achieve such a vision actually just means we can't achieve such a position. Moreover, we actually have to look at what are the choices that we as individuals make within the social sphere, or the moral sphere, or the intellectual sphere today. What are the choices we make today in order to create that world in the future? And this is the fundamental push and purpose of the Baha'i faith, is to raise the consciousness of humankind and summon that, if you will, deep well of human initiative and capacity to actually create a future such as the Guardian here is speaking. This is what the Baha'is are doing globally, attempting to actually put in the hands of individuals the ability to transform society, to actually build up a new world. What needs to be done is to look at the actual process of social transformation and of scientific progress, to see that the things that we once believed were utopian, overly idealistic, and could never possibly be achieved, have now actually become, at least in part, and sometimes totally, a reality. Because it's only then we can see that this claim that it is unrealistic, the pessimistic position, is actually what blocks us from achieving it. When we look across our planet, and we look at what humankind has achieved in the last several centuries, even looking at what we have achieved in the last century, it's actually really shocking. We have here examples like mathematics, astronomy, the investigation of the deep oceans, setting satellites out into space, having an international space station, many of the technological advancements we have achieved, but also the pushing forward of the ability of humankind to understand the natural world, even to the extent of truly getting down to the origins of the actual universe itself. It's only because we're really surrounded by these all the time. We live in a technological, scientific age that we don't really notice how profoundly shocking this is. So if you had actually traveled back in time 2 centuries, 1 century, and actually begin sharing the vision of our current day in our reach of our understanding and our technological prowess, it would utterly and completely astound everyone you met. And I propose it would astound even the founders of the scientific revolution. When you first had people coming forward talking about the new philosophy, this way of actually approaching the world as it was flowering, they were making claims about man's epistemic reach, our intellectual reach, to be able to understand the world, and the potential for the fashioning of new technologies. Yet at the time when they were actually saying it, they couldn't yet do it. It was actually a decision, a solemn decision by groups of individuals to actually go out and create it into a reality. It wasn't something that already existed that we could point to. This is why I say often you better be able to build it. You have to be able to build the scientific world that we currently have prior to it being real. You actually have to have the way to put the idea of what we can actually achieve in the hearts and minds of people so that they can catch a vision which, I guarantee, in the 1700s, 1600s, 1800s, and 1900s, seemed just fully out of the reach of humankind. But it's those individuals that actually grabbed hold of that vision and said, we can actually achieve this, that then actually went out and made that world a reality. If you were to travel back in time to the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, you guarantee would have heard people expressing their disbelief, their pessimism about the ability of humankind to do what we do today. And you would actually have to defend the abilities of humanity to that person. To say that humanity would ever actually put a satellite in space is unrealistic, would have seemed sensible previously. To say that it was unrealistic that we could actually be exploring with our technological prowess distant galaxies or understanding the very natures of matter would sound completely unrealistic. History tells us that we can. And as Baha'is, we believe that it's just as the capacities for man's intellectual advancement should not have been stopped or put a damper on. When it comes to social transformation, it's the same issue. And this transformation of the spirit, of the soul of humankind, upon which is reared any social progress ever. Because human hearts have to be changed in order for us to develop a society that can actually become more harmonious as we move forward. And one of the fundamental principles of the Baha'i faith is that of unity. Here's a quote from One Common Faith from the Baha'i World Center. The power through which these goals will be progressively realized is that of unity. Although to Baha'is the most obvious of truths, its implications for the current crisis of civilization appear to escape most contemporary discourse. Few will disagree that the universal disease sapping the health of the body of humankind is that of disunity. Its manifestations everywhere cripple political will, debilitate the collective urge to change, and poison national and religious relationships. How strange, then, that unity is regarded as a goal to be attained, if at all, in a distant future, after a host of disorders in social, political, economic, and moral life have been addressed and somehow or other resolved. Yet the latter are essentially symptoms and side effects of the problem, not its root cause. Why has so fundamental an inversion of reality come to be widely accepted? The answer is presumably because the achievement of genuine unity of mind and heart among peoples whose experiences are deeply at variance is thought to be entirely beyond the capacity of society's existing institutions. While this tacit admission is a welcome advance over the understanding of process of social evolution that prevailed a few decades ago, it is of limited practical assistance in responding to the challenge. Oftentimes we're looking to some technological thing that will actually solve our problems. Yet even technology itself and science itself needs a spirit to actually direct the forces of science and technology towards ends that will actually serve humankind. Oftentimes, people will give the example of science's power, say, to eradicate polio. Yet we have to understand that it wasn't science that eradicated polio. It was the ethics of humankind, the will to alleviate the suffering of humanity that actually eradicated polio. When we look at science itself and the wonders that it can create, we all know that it can actually create things that are destructive to humankind, engines of war, chemicals that poison our world. It itself is a vehicle for the human spirit. So in order for political will or technological advancements or scientific understanding to actually solve the problems of humanity, we need a collective vision and a collective desire to rise up and transform the human spirit and to make it what it actually could be. Many a cause which past ages have been regarded as purely visionary, yet in this day has become most easy and practicable. Why should this most great and lofty cause, the day star of the firmament of true civilization and the cause of the glory, the advancement, the well-being, and the success of all humanity, be regarded as impossible of achievement? Surely the day will come when its beauteous light shall shed illumination upon the assemblage of men. The vision that Baha'u'llah has put forward for the world is ultimately glorious. It's exquisite. And we do believe that these principles actually enunciated by Baha'u'llah so long ago are sacred. They're not just good ideas. They're holy and blessed principles flowing out from the will of God. But that doesn't mean that we think for a moment that it won't be hard. It will take unremitting toil. It will take courage, discipline, and tenacity in order to make it become a reality. Abdu'l here in our last quote is stating that so often in the past people have said something is unrealistic or idealistic, and yet we have actually achieved many of these things. And we have to remember that the spirit of humanity is shockingly powerful, that we can rise up as a people to actually fashion wonders of society. So will it take indomitable determination to achieve it? Yes, it will. So when I look at the Baha'i faith and its teachings, I don't see it as utopian. I just see it as very difficult, and that it will take time, and that I myself and any who wishes to actually fight for it will not see the fruit of it, but that this is how it's always been. So we can understand that yes, the ideals of the Baha'i faith are very high, very exalted. But to say it is idealistic is not itself an argument, whether or not the Baha'i faith itself is true. We have seen humanity achieve things that constantly throughout history people have said were impossible, that now are actually a reality of our day. So the Baha'i faith itself might be false, but to call something utopian is actually not an argument against it.